Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. This is our first Bold Ideas event of the year and the first in this space, right? Pretty great. Awesome. You can clap for that. Yeah. And so some of you were probably at the event last year, some of you were not. But last year, this time, it was October, we met and spoke at the Guild Theater in Menlo Park about AI, VR, AR, and all things sort of future tech before the big bang of AI that came out probably a month or so later, right?
These ones are
Help me out here.
proximity.
There you go.
And so here we are today. But just in case people don't know Boz, most do, but I don't want to make any assumptions. I have a little bio I'll read about Boz, who's, by the way, I'm Jim Egan, head of school, Synapse School. Again, I don't want to make any assumptions.
Not here with a Friday update.
I'm not. It's not a Friday update. But most of you know Boz, and you know him as a parent. But I did want to give you a brief bio of Boz. He's a pretty impressive guy. I suppose most people know he's a parent here of some lower schoolers, but he's also CTO at Meta, right? And Boz graduated from Harvard in 2004. Did I get that right? And before, is that right? Is that right? 2004?
Yeah, 04.
Okay.
That's right.
And before he worked as a developer at Microsoft, is that right?
For 18 months, yeah.
18 months.
It was a good 18 months, though.
Yes. And
Got a lot
then
done.
you joined Facebook 2006.
January 9th, 2006.
January 2006, where you created Newsfeed, right? You spent a lot of time working on anti-abuse systems, some of which are still in production, I read. And at various times you've been involved as an engineering director, overseeing events and places and photos and videos and timeline and privacy and mobile and feed ads. And then most recently, you were serving as a VP of ads and business platform, where you led engineering, product research, analytics. And in 2017, if I read correctly, you created the company's AR VR organization, Reality Labs. And now you're leading the efforts in AR, VR, AI, consumer hardware, across Quest, Portal, Ray-Ban Stories, and more. And it's just so great to have Synapse in our community and back here, again, talking with me about emerging technologies and their impact on the future. So thanks, Boz. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. Oh, yes. So, thank you for coming. Otherwise, there's a chance it was going to be me and Jim. So this is nice.
It's always a chance.
It's always a risk. We would
Yeah.
still do it, by the way. We'd still talk.
Well, we would still
wouldn't
do
be
it.
a problem. So, but I'm glad it's not just us.
That's absolutely true. And so 1 year ago, we spoke, as I alluded to earlier, a lot has happened. Certainly, probably for you on the inside, right, of the industry, but a lot of us on the outside as well have had an impact. So let's just get right to the questions. I got a number of questions from parents. I have some myself. But let's get right to it. Let's think about it. So I was thinking about this earlier today, this question of ethics, right? It was prompted to me by what I was reading regarding the terrible situation in the Middle East, right? And how certain people are interpreting the situation here in America. And I'm like wondering, did they take ethics classes in college? What this response in some of the universities has been shocking to me, right? And so,
my own alma mater.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like,
Throwing some things at us.
Right? Are they cutting ethics out of curriculum? How can you graduate from Harvard or even go to Harvard and not understand terrorism is a bad thing? But anyway, I'm already digressing. Unless you want to comment on that.
No, that was, so for those who didn't follow the news, it was kind of depressing for my alma mater, but we had quite a large number of student groups sign into a relatively heavy-handed, kind of a pro-Hamas letter. Jim and I spoke briefly in advance. I think reasonable people can agree that the situation in the Israel-Palestine region since certainly 1948, 1967, 2 wars created a large refugee population effectively in the nation state. They're not democratic. They have no democratic access to power. They have no ability to emigrate. They have no ability to self-govern. It's a challenging situation, and I think we can all have sympathy for the situation that the Palestinian people find themselves in that time. And also, terrorism bad. Don't kill women, children, innocent people for your political ends. Like, that is kind of a pretty standard bedrock principle. What do I think? I will take a bolder stance actually and say that I think we've probably had a sense of for a little while. The elite institutions of the country, universities, have become kind of monolithic in their thinking and in their approach, and a little bit out of touch with reality and practicality in some places, in some ways. And I think it's not totally novel, and sometimes this yields really positive, profound social effects, and sometimes it doesn't. And so, like universities were hotbeds of McCarthyism, which is terrible. Universities were hotbeds of anti-war rhetoric and civil rights rhetoric, which are arguably more noble. So, like, I don't know, there is like a long-standing history going back 100+ years at least of universities becoming these places that can become weirdly monocultures on extreme vectors, and those vectors are not always super in touch with reality, not always practical, not always good. We're certainly experiencing that in a lot of corners.
Yes, that's right. So think about it in terms of AI, because there was a question that came to me from a parent. What ethical considerations should be in place when using AI in classrooms to ensure privacy and data and security issues for students? That's the one question. But I would even I'm thinking about like those who are constructing AI. How does ethics play into that? And is that happening in the big tech world?
Yeah, one thing that I think a really good trick that people can use to think about AI as it exists today. And I want to be very clear. Tonight when I'm talking about AI, I'm going to talk about the AI that we have access to now, or that we credibly could have access to in the next couple of years. There's like some distant future AI which is sentient and it has autonomy and is either a threat or is interested. That's not that. That's not happening now. That's not happening in 5 years. It's not happening in 10 years. That's a different thing. The AIs we have access to now, so a good test for you is substitute the word the internet for artificial intelligence. And that will give you a pretty good guidepost. Because large language models, and it does bear a slightly technical discussion of what they are, large language models you can kind of think of it as somebody taking the internet and putting it in a database. Okay, like the entire internet, and they put it in a database. It's a special kind of database. It's a database that previously was somewhat the unique domain of humans, an associative database. And so previously, for those who are familiar with computers, you go to a database, it's like an Excel spreadsheet. There's a row, it's got a column, and it's got a row, and you look at what's there, and it can tell you the answer. And you can do some interesting math on it, but it's quite specific. And if you miss by one, you miss the whole thing. It's like, well, if you typed A3 instead of A2, you don't know what A2 is because you typed the wrong thing. Humans have this really cool ability, associative memory, where like if I say to Jim a polka dotted triceratops, even though Jim has never seen one, he can imagine that. And what's really crazy is we can all imagine it. We're kind of imagining probably somewhat similar things. But if I went to a computer, if I went to Google and was like, show me a picture of a polka dotted triceratops, it's like, no, I don't have a photo of that. It's not a photo that I don't know. Like, here's a triceratops photo that somebody, assembled, and here's like some polka dot, I don't know. And then we can do this other thing, which is we can say like, we can kind of, that's a hallucination of a kind, we call that, right? That's a hallucination that we've all just had put together. We've imagined a thing that isn't real, doesn't exist, never has existed, and yet we've all come to some certainty on it thanks to the combinatoric power of human language. And then also I can give Jim a concept, I can say red, and Jim can come up with a word that's top of mind for him. And then we'll be a different one. We'll have a different word. We have different associations with words. And so we took the entire internet and we put it in a database and we gave it this associative context so we can jump from concepts that are roughly connected to one another through some semantic gossamer that is impossible to specify exactly, but yet that every human manages to navigate seamlessly. That's a very cool capability we've given them. Once we've made that, that's called a foundation model. We call it a foundation model. It is a block of stone. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't exist. It doesn't have agency. It's nothing. It's just a database. On top of that, we add a layer of what we call conventional machine learning, the same kind of machine learning that we've been doing as a society certainly since 2012. We add that's a layer that can, and we tune it. That's called a fine-tuned model, and we try to say, okay, when you get questions like this, actually, if you just ask the pre-trained model a question, it gibbers. It just gives words back. They don't make any sense. We then train it like, hey, here's how humans speak. Like, here's how language works. And we tune it in a domain and specific, and so now you got this pre-trained model. Then there's even another layer on top of that where we actually get humans to rate it. Reinforcement learning with human feedback. And we say, hey, we gave you these two answers. Which one do you think is a good answer? This one. And it gets further and further better at giving answers that humans want. I say all of this to say, nothing that you do on top of the base model can change the database of knowledge. And so all the problems of content on the internet are in this model. All the problems of human bias that you will find on the internet, they're in this model. All the it's all there. It's all in this model. These pre-trained these foundation models. We do what we can on top of that to then make it useful and make it safe. That's like the system of it. When you're using an AI, you're sending data over the server to a company that's done this kind of training. So the same things when you're using the internet, you send a search to Google, like you're sending the information over the internet to a company that's done a bunch of work on a server to have a model that gives you an answer. So almost all the questions that people have about AI and the concerns they have about AI, if you substitute the word for the internet and ask them, how do you feel now? It should help gain clarity. So to answer the specific question on the ethics of using AI, it for me is very similar to the ethics of using the internet. Yep, there's data and security and privacy questions. Who has access to the information that you have? Does the company have access to it? Do employees of the company have access to it? Do governments who have subpoena power have access to it? Do governments who are, autocratic regimes have access to it? What are they allowed to do with it? What recourse do you have? Those are fair questions for internet, fair questions for AI. What are the biases? What are the structural, racial, systematic biases in the foundational way that this thing operates? There's those in the internet, there's those in AI. What are the dangerous things? What kinds of pornographic, violent things can I get into that are in here? Those are on the internet, they're in these models. The models, we spend tons and tons of time trying to fine tune them and get them to be safe. And there's all these elaborate schemes you've read about, people jailbreaking them so they can get to the base model. But it's almost all a farce, because those people, if they wanted to go get hey, look, I found pornography on the internet. No, someone
Shocker.
call the news. Yeah, I know it's there. So people go to these elaborate lengths to jailbreak the AIs, but they're almost always getting worse results than you could just get if you Google the thing. And I've had really serious conversations with government officials around the world about this topic, because it's a new thing and it's powerful, and they want to make sure. There's only two ways to profit in politics. You either have to be responsible, you have to take credit for it, or be against it. And they're trying to figure out which one they are. Are they going to take credit? Are they going to be against? They don't know yet. And it's often, they're like, well, I asked your model about anthrax, and it said it couldn't make anthrax for me. Great. But then I asked it about some other stuff, and it had some information. So I just okay, I Google it, and it's yeah, there's page after page after page after page after page of all these things. And you're that. So I do think that so often we get so contextually concerned about this novel technology, but this is really just a novel delivery format for the information that was already available online.
Got it. So in terms of, let's sort of even bring it big here. There's a lot of tech that's been hyped over the years, right? There's the hype cycle of various things. How big a deal is AI in the land of things that are overhyped?
Yeah, I think this is a huge deal. And those who know me know I was never big on crypto. I was never big on a bunch of these things. AI, I think, is an internet-sized big deal. Why? Now, I've just told you it's kind of internet complete, but I do think interfaces matter a tremendous amount. And the problem I mentioned earlier is a problem that we've been grappling with for a long time when it comes to humans interacting with machines. The human almost always has to adapt to the machine. Now we try to make, through usability and user research, the machine better. We make the handlebar grips match the human form factor a little bit better. We try to make sure it's, okay, if you're turning the motorcycle, yep, it's that's the range of motion of the human shoulder, because beyond that it doesn't work. So I'm not saying we don't think about humans when we design machines. We do. But generally, once the machine is done, that machine is done, and the humans have to adapt to that machine. And even in computing technology, in digital technology, this has been true for a long time. If you go back to Stanford Research Institute, 1968, the mother of all demos, Douglas Engelbart. Look it up on YouTube. It will blow your mind. 1968. First of all, they invented the computer mouse. They invented multi users editing a document simultaneously at the same time while on a video call, the first ever digital video call in 1968. Incredible. And the major thing that Douglas Engelbart was trying to grapple with, his raison d'etre, the reason they invented the mouse was like, how do you get all the human potential that's here and unlock it through this amazing digital device that has this huge capability? And the best we could land on was like a keyboard, which was invented for telegraph. He had invented a thing called the chord set, which had the mouse and a chord set, and it was just 5 keys to do all your letters. You remembered combinations for each letter. It was much, much faster than a keyboard, but as far as we know, only one person ever mastered it, and that was him, Douglas Engelbart. Everyone else just used this. It's like, so we're using this keyboard. It's like, okay, I can see a picture and I can push a button. It's a glyph and it shows up. And so what we found out is like, you need to be very precise. When you're using your computer mouse and there's like, you're trying to close a window and there's an X and you miss the X, it doesn't close. Like, I'm sorry, you have to click the X and then it will close. Otherwise, it doesn't know what you want. It's not inferring any intentionality. And I think of this all the time when you have, especially young kids, especially kids who are pre-verbal, we are unbelievable at identifying what these kids want, right? Like we are, like a toddler who's pre-verbal, who's trying to accomplish some goal, you can tell right away what they're trying to accomplish. You just know. We're mapping out constantly one another's intentions and intentionalities and the machine is not. It is waiting for you to do a very precise thing, at which point it will respond mechanically in a very precise way. So as much as digital computers feel very different from these machines, like a tractor, they're not. Like they are very highly specified things, and you have to adapt to the thing. These large language models hold this promise of taking human vagueness, the vague notions that we have of intentions, hey, I caught this 3 words of this song, I don't know what it is, or I remember this, there was a document I was editing a few years ago. I sent an email a while back, I don't know, maybe it was to somebody. That's how our brains are. And the computer's like, no, I got nothing, that's useless to me. And large language models have this tremendous power to close gaps like that. And so suddenly, not only do you, those are fringe cases I've just mentioned, but actually what you don't realize is you've been doing a ton of work in your brain for years, cataloging every email you've sent so that if you need to search for it, you know how to search for it. I love putting unusual words in emails that I think I might need to reference later, so I can remember. I remember this one word
right there.
I remember this one word that I put in that email. I have a very purple dialogue with my own email. People are like, why do you use this? What a weird word choice, this email. That's so I can search for it later.
That's a great tip. Do other people do that?
Little mini pro tip.
I was trying to find my notes from last year for tonight.
That's
It was
right.
Boz, bold idea. And I was like, it kept pulling up tonight's notes.
That's right.
I'm like, ugh.
So I just think it's a superpower for the machines to be able to start to understand intentionality and context. And what's probably the most exciting thing about these large language models that we've really uncovered the last year is that they can do what's called multimodal understanding. So you can hand these models not just a corpus of text, and it understands. It doesn't understand anything actually. By the way, it's a bit of a trick, but it is able to process the text. You can also hand it an image, and it can process the image as readily as it can the text, and it can actually go back and forth between text and image at the same time, and audio, and throw it all in there. It's just data as far as the model is concerned. It's all just information, and it can kind of chew on it all. That's very exciting for me as well, because a lot of what we try to accomplish, a lot of the ways that we're able to understand one another's intentionality is by using the full range of our senses. My child didn't explain to me what they wanted to do. I was using visual cues and a knowledge of common sense of the world to map it out. So one side is we have a machine that can now adapt much more to our unusual shape, which is exciting. And then the second piece, which I just kind of hinted at, is this common sense piece. Now, I want to be clear. These AIs don't know anything, and they will hallucinate and make something up to satisfy you as quickly as they possibly can. And so they're not trustworthy in that way. but they do have something that is getting close to what we would consider common sense, which is they do have the ability to like understand what concepts are and are not related. And that is a powerful part of common sense. It's like, it turns out, like a child in a house walking towards a bottle, there's like, in the space of things that kid could possibly want in that bottle, there's only a relatively small number of answers that you will actually find in any human corpus. Like, you won't find blood. True that blood could be held in a bottle, but like it's probably not the case. It's probably milk or water. Like, that's your juice, maybe. Like, that's your. And we just know that intuitively. No one had to explain that to me, that there was no blood in that bottle. But like, the machine's like, I don't know, it could be anything in that bottle. Like, that's they just, as far as liquids, like, what are all, here's a list of all possible liquids. It's like, no, that's not helpful. It's not hydrochloric acid. We don't keep hydrochloric acid in a sippy cup. And so there's a sense then, on not just on the inputs, but also in the domains, that there's just like the truth is, of all the magnificent human concepts that we have access to, at any given time, relatively few of them are in play. Like, there's only so many things that could possibly be in here, in all credible reality. So I'm excited about those things. Everyone wants to focus, understandably, on the interface that we're having directly with these AIs, which is spectacular for the reasons I just mentioned. That is not actually the most economically powerful part of them. The most economically powerful part of them will be this horizontal application of this technology to every problem. And I really mean this. Every problem will benefit over some fullness of time from this technology. If you, pick a discipline. My sister's a lawyer. So much legal work is busy work. It's paralegals having to go chase down case law and look at making sure the references are right, making sure the cross references are, making sure the format is right, and it turns out the formatting for each different court is different. I mean, these are terrible uses of human intellect and capacity. It's really not a good use of it. They're very labor intensive. They're very cost intensive. They make the cost of the American legal system, in particular, prohibitively high for the average person to participate in on a level playing field. And so that's a huge change. In human resources, the ability for these AIs to identify people who might be feeling unhappy, might be feeling homesick, might be feeling undervalued by virtue of really subtle cues in how they're engaging is something that's way above human capacity, not because we can't see it if we're looking for it. We're just not even looking for it. We can't look everywhere at once. You can't find it all. And so, I don't know, I'd pick two off the top of my head. Pick a favorite, and I will blow your mind with it. It does not matter what you're doing. This will change the way that work is done over some period of time. That will take longer, both because it's like not as sexy as like a direct consumer product. That's what everyone loves to talk about and do. But also because you have to train it in each domain. And so there's to be expertise.
Even in the physical labor space, like for example, my son lives in Colorado. He is training to be a ski patroller, right? How will it impact his ability to navigate avalanches?
It's funny. Avalanches are one of the best case scenarios. If you've studied backcountry skiing at all, and who hasn't really among us, it's a quite an arcane. I go backcountry snowboarding every year up in Canada, and it's a really arcane set of kind of rules. Like, they dig out a cube of snow. They like drop their hand on it from different heights and see how long it takes for the snow to fragment, at what layer it fragments. And they're doing visual observation on hoarfrost. This is terrible, Jim. This is a terrible way
this is going to get better.
to
My kids
ensure
going
that you
into the
don't
danger
die in an
zones all the
avalanche.
time.
I wear an Avi pack, which is my main trick, is just swim through it. No, but we already have examples of this in lots of places. If you take a photo of it, the amount of information that the AI is able to glean from that photo, it's just orders of magnitude better, more rich, more observant, more capable. Because again, it's finding patterns in a very high order space. So I don't know, it can be hard to visualize for us, but like if you think about things in a curve, you plot things that are similar, you plot things out on an XY axis, and things that are closer are more similar, things that are farther. You can do the same thing in 3 dimensions. It's like, okay, color, size, and shape, and we can imagine these things. The way these large language models work is they're plotting these things into billions of dimensions. And so they're finding things that are similar that no human would ever identify as having been similar, but like there is actually a pattern there. So they're super sophisticated pattern matchers. Maybe a better example, so avalanches are one of my favorite cases of a thing that you will just take a picture. You still need the ski patrol person.
Right.
But
It's going to enhance their ability.
You take
to
the
do good
picture,
job. Yeah.
and now his judgment on, okay, avalanche risk is high,
Right.
goes way up.
Is that similar to how I've read about AIs, how they're going to impact the medical?
I mean, radiology is primed for this. Yeah,
It's the
so
same sort of
we the Mayo Clinic and others are already doing this. Radiology has already beat, for certain types of cancer,
Right.
the best human doctors in the field at identifying those cancers from photographs. It's already happened.
Right.
And we'll never go back. And it's not like those doctors aren't doing the absolute, they're the most trained, they're the best,
Right.
and they've seen the most, but you can't compare. Now, so there's a long time before we're going to harvest these benefits, because in this case, it's not like all cancers, they may get there at some point. It's like they train it on like, here's these specific cancers where we have enough instances of the cancer to train a model on it, and then it does amazing.
What's the timeline, like for healthcare, for cancer? Like,
You know what's funny is this is where we do run into sclerosis, for lack of a better word. Like, it's not like we didn't know. Like, the medical profession is a heavily legislated, regulated profession, and so the pace of progress is very slow. I had the funniest conversation a couple years ago. At the time we had 2 cats, and one of our cats had cancer, and went to the doctor, and what's the prognosis? And they're like, oh, we'll take care of this. We get good medicine. So, oh, that's so lucky. They're like, well, no, we have much better cancer medicine for animals than we do for humans. I was like, that's kind of weird. Why? They're like, well, because we can test on the animals.
right.
And like, there's no like privacy doctrine preventing us from like sharing information about how our animals did on these tests.
Right.
So as a consequence, your animals have better cancer medicine than you do. And it's like, we've chosen to do that. We can choose not to do that. If we chose not to do that, we would have more people dying. We'd have a privacy challenge. We have a lot of problems. So it's like, you decide as a society, how do you want to spend your credits? You can spend those credits on privacy, and you can spend them on conservative and no harm done. And if you do that, the net is that more harm is done.
Right. That's it. So you're saying every field. So let's think about teachers, right?
Yeah.
So just today we had and I think I mentioned this earlier, I didn't know we were doing it, but we had a staff meeting and we talked about AI. And some of our teachers, Isha, I think, who's out here today, Director of Technology, she asked at the beginning, how many people are comfortable with these large language models, ChatGPT one. And actually a teacher then, Christopher, said, well, what do you mean, comfortable using it or comfortable in the long term and for humanity? And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're really talking about using it, right? So we'll stick to that.
Yeah.
Because the thumbs differed depending on how you interpret that, right? So it's like thumbs up using it, thumbs not so up for the other way. But I digress. The how do you see this helping the teacher? I have my views. What do you think?
Yeah, quite a few things. First of all, you can't dangle that kind of a digression on me and not send me way in. Anytime you're saying, no, I want to use this, but I'm worried about society having it, you should be checking yourself. That's like a bad sign. It's like, no, for me, this is great. I don't want everyone else to have it, but please don't take it away from me.
What about if you're like,
if that's happening, you should be cautious.
Well, I'm bullish on it, but I'm not so sure it's going to end well for humans. Like, do I have to check myself?
We are such a weird species. We are doing great. Sorry, I know Remy's here, so I'm trying to check myself.
I know. Remy's
we are doing absolutely fantastic as a society. In 2019, we had the most humans ever employed at the highest wages and the highest standard of living in human history. The proportion of humans in poverty has literally never been lower. We are so weird. Why are we so... We have done unbelievable work. People's lives 200 years ago were closer to people's lives 4,000 years ago than they were today. Like, we are doing unbelievable. We are number one, you guys. We are crushing this game. We are absolutely destroying the game. Arguably, the biggest, most important issue that we've screwed up, the environment, we screwed up because we stopped technological progress on nuclear power. Conservatism absolutely caused, and by the way, I'm a rabid environmentalist. I'm on the board of the Peninsula Open Space Trust, 3rd generation board member, The environmental movement almost certainly caused the greatest environmental carnage possible. with this thing. So it's like, I do find it such a weird set of conversations I constantly have to have, being like, you guys, do you know how things are amazing? They're amazing. It's probably an admirable human trait, evolutionarily important, that we focus on what's not going well and on the risk, and I think it's good. But man, take a beat. Anyway, Remy's out there. He's reading James and the Giant Peach out there. He's doing great. He didn't care about this. I could have cursed up and down. I didn't, though. I think there was other kids here. It's not just Remy.
It's true. You don't know. We can't see. It could be.
This could be all kids right now. You guys have replaced this with could be a kindergarten sitting right here right now, for all I know. Free childcare. All right, take it away. So, okay, back to the question at hand. Using it today, how do we think about this? Again, I think using the internet as a basis is a pretty smart way to start. I think for most teachers, if you ask them, hey, is your job made easier or harder because of the internet? It's probably made easier. It's not uniformly easier. Certainly there's cheating and there's bad influence, but like a lot more materials out there and more ideas, stronger communication networks, stronger contact with other teachers, other curriculums, ideas being passed around fluidly in real time, connections maintained over distance, over time that were previously impractical. Large language models aren't the same thing, obviously, but they're a thing of that magnitude. If I think about the teachers that I know in my life, some of this work that is truly work. Like you have an idea for a plan, you can visualize it, you can get it in your head, but you gotta write it down and do a lesson plan and do a bunch of things. I don't know if Synapse teachers do lesson plans or not. Is that
They do.
I don't know.
Is this like a leading question?
No, I just like to make sure. It's not a judgment. I'd like to make sure.
Do you know how many? Oh.
No, tell me. Listen, get it on. Get your.
Yes. Did you go to pin nights? When we talk about the structures, Hart's model.
Of course.
Okay. The short answer is yes.
No one said the word lesson plan. I just thought if they called it something different, you guys would call it Hart's plans.
Yeah, we tend to hamstring ourselves.
You have a whole fancy language. You don't use any of the words that other people use. By the way, large language models are amazing at this. I could create a Synapse translator that was like, here's the Synapse word for the thing that other people cause this thing.
We had a whole thing today in my leadership meeting today, because I'm like, parents probably don't really, do we have a shared meaning of Synapse learning outcomes? And they looked at me like I was bananas. And I'm like, we probably don't, right? And they're like, what do you mean? Everyone, I'm like, we need to. Anyway, we can talk offline.
There's an opportunity.
Yes,
exactly. We'll train a Synapse large language model.
Yes. So yes, we have language.
So,
yes, we have lessons.
So my point is there's a tremendous amount of work there's a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes for teaching that isn't the work itself of advancing the knowledge of or understanding or emotional capacity of a child.
Right.
But it's what sets the scene for it. It's what allows that work to happen. And if you can take that work and make it faster and produce it at, by the way, a higher quality, and what a great thing. The ability for someone to take a creative concept, the pure thought stuff, the unique domain of what that person has been able to arrive at through their unique lived experience, the position they find themselves in, the context that they're in, and get that into a substantive format of images and text and artifacts that they can then bring other people along with them on that journey, is a tremendous opportunity for large language models to accelerate for people's work. So again, this is from the reducing rote work aspect of things. Mm-hmm. There's a separate aspect of it, which is co-creation. Almost every discipline that I know of celebrates collaboration and partnership, and for good reason. Humans are tremendously talented and phenomenally interesting things. But each of us possesses a single point of perspective on any problem, on any situation. Just we can only possess our point of view. And as soon as you add one other point of view, you now are able to triangulate, right? You've now got two coordinates view on it. And so someone's going to spot something and we all believe in this, right? I don't publish anything without having somebody, hey, just can you look at this, make sure, is it a typo? Is there a logical fallacy? Did I just did I miss something big? It gets better the more people you add, but there's a diminishing return. Going from 1 to 2 is a big jump in quality of the output, in the consistency of the output, in the creativity of the output. Adding 3 and 4, and it starts to flatten out a little bit. And so even in software, no single piece of software at Meta gets shipped without 2 engineers looking at it. Someone has to write it, someone code reviews it. If it's really tricky, they'll have more people code review it. That's just standard practice in our industry. We've been doing it forever. And so these are, no professional writer goes without an editor. It's considered incredibly foolhardy to do that. You have an editor. And so these large language models are actually capable of serving the purpose of not just one, but multiple editors, multiple different points of view. And you can say, hey, what do you think the critiques will be of this piece that I've written? Do you find are there any obvious problems with it? And there's things they can't do that humans are really good at yet, like going and searching for really current, up-to-date information is a relatively large challenge still for large language models. There's versions of it, but they're not great. So
Do you do that like now? I mean, because I put stuff in and say, hey, find grammar mistakes, spelling. It's amazing.
Yeah,
But can it take it a step further and like say?
absolutely.
Or so give me an example.
You can offer a critique. So like offer a critique. If you had to write a rebuttal to this essay, like what would that look like? And by the way, the point isn't that it like nails it every time. Sometimes it just sends you some nonsense. But you're perfectly capable of filtering out nonsense. Right. That's not the hardest thing. Right. One of my favorite examples of this is in the mid 90s, IBM Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov at chess, right? At the time, Gary was the most famous world chess grandmaster playing. He was the #1 in the world. After beating Deep Blue the first time, I think the second time there was a stalemate or 1-1, and the third time he lost. We didn't stop playing chess. In fact, chess is more popular now than it's ever been. And what's really cool about it is why is it more popular? Well, people are playing AIs, like is one of the answers. Like people, and the AI can play at any level, right? So you can play like a perfect, you have a perfect opponent. If you think about it, conventionally, chess is like, you would have had to like find an opponent who's at or near your level. There was whole systems for matching people across cities. Like now it's like you can always find an opponent who's just past your level, just like 1 degree past your level. And then the chess masters study the AI moves from when they beat masters and learn new strategies. Actually, Go, which is a much harder game than chess, combinatorically speaking, which was, when I was growing up, when I was even getting my formal undergraduate education, was taught this was being an unwinnable game for computers, was beaten by AlphaGo at Google a couple years back. The Go player who lost to AlphaGo, he was like in tears, and they were like, "Are you sad?" Because he was an incredible player. No one thought he could be beaten, and he's like, it was so beautiful. He's like, no one had ever seen, no one had even considered the strategy the machine played. And the whole game, he was just like so captivated. Yeah. And then it was a kind of a one moment, he just like saw it, and he was like, it was just the most beautiful thing. And now that strategy is like it's like they study that strategy. So my point is being like, points of perspective, like a creative partner, somebody who like in the middle of the night, you're like, hey, I just need to bounce this idea off somebody. Mm-hmm. And they're amazing at this. They're amazing at it. Right. Or debugging problems. You're like, hey, like I got this weird thing. My fridge is making this noise. Like it's like, well, you try this. You're like, yeah, I tried that. It didn't work. Like, all right, you try this. Like I don't know. Those things. It's amazing at these like, things where you kind of want just a creative. It's just I need another something to bounce things off of. So it has these tremendous capacities that I think for any creative professional, and I certainly put teachers in that set. Nobody dealing with a more dynamic environment, a need to keep things fresh for themselves, but also for young people, I think will benefit a lot from this work.
Now, what about kids? I was thinking about this weekend. I was back, my daughter's a senior in high school, and I was meeting with, it was parent-teacher conferences. She's at a boarding school on the East Coast. And we were talking about her writing, and the teacher, her English teacher, was saying Sarah spends a lot of time thinking about the meta, use the term, and is not spending, therefore she's not spending a lot of, if she's spending her time thinking about like the big thoughts around Othello, she's not spending a lot of time on the actual sort of mechanics of her essays, right? That you just can't do both, right? Yeah. She's up here thinking the big thoughts, you need to be thinking these other thoughts. So I was thinking about this in terms of AI. Is there something there that can help like a kid in that capacity? How does it unlock time for the student?
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is where generationally, we will continue to struggle. Douglas Adams, a famous, great science fiction author, wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, had a great quote in one of his books, which I'll not get exactly right, but it's close enough, which is that anything that happens before the age of 25 is how the world works. Between 25 and 35, it's a tremendous invention, and I might make money off of it. And after the age of 35, it's an abomination and should be destroyed. I'm 41, so I find this really like too close to home. right? Like it's like, oh man, like it's just like, these kids are doing, and I think education really has historically lagged, right? The education system that was pioneered in America was largely based on an industrial revolution world where you're preparing kids. First of all, we need to have kids in school so the parents can go to factories, which was very different from how school was done in an agrarian society, where the kids needed to actually be at home during the day to work in the fields and then would get classes on the sides. So you needed to have, the school hours even were set based on parents needing to go to the factories. The goal was to get kids to a certain base level of competency so that they could get factory jobs and like be productive members of society in that world. And many is the critique I won't share, and certainly you all know it much better than I do, this being your field. But like certainly many is the critique of the modern education system for not having grown matured enough from those roots, the kind of industrial era roots that it has. Certainly I remember all the tests that I took in high school where I was told I would not have a calculator on my person in the future in my life. I just checked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 calculators within reach of my person at this moment as I give a talk. They were just wrong. Of course I have a calculator. Are you mental? Why would we need to teach anybody? Now I'm not saying there's a tremendous greatness in having a fundamental understanding of the pieces. So I would be, to bring it to the case of your daughter, I would be very disappointed if your daughter wasn't able, when brought to bear, to understand a sentence structure, structure of a paragraph, structure of an argument, structure of an essay. Why? And I think the same thing with the answer, same as with the math. It's like, I think we all have a good sense of this, which is like, to go from the really multi-parallel processing of human thought and to get an idea into the world requires this really, you have to practice serializing. You have to practice the process inside your brain of taking all that cloud of associations into a shape that's firm enough that you can then like pour out through these really inefficient mechanisms, our words, our hands, whatever the thing is. And then likewise, you really want to have a really robust ability to then look at a thing and get information, get a picture into the brain to feed that cloud and refresh it. And so I think having a principal understanding to, when you're looking at basic mathematical concepts, if you're looking at basic language concepts, is super important. But no one's really proposing to skip those things. Like you need those things to even use the AI in the first place. That's like that's not a thing. So the real question is like, is there value in me being able to do long division? There is not. I can tell you that right now. I'm a professional of many years. I'm a chief technology officer of a major corporation.
We got our math specialists.
There is not. Actually, I've done the most long division I've done in the last 20 years over the last couple of weeks because our son Archer, we're working with him on his penmanship primarily. Unfortunately, he's quite quick with math in his brain. He's now gotten to a level of math problem that actually requires him to do work, and he can't read his own writing. And so you can see where he's actually done all the math correctly, but like then he's just written the number incorrectly and then he's off track. So to get him to work in his pen, every night he makes me a math worksheet. And he has to use every digit, every numeral in the math worksheet. And his math worksheets are incredibly challenging. It's irrational fractions, like it's multiplied by like 9-digit numbers. And I'm supposed to do it all by hand. He gives me a little box to show my work. And then he takes my calculator and checks my answers. Because he can't do that math yet. He knows we taught him all the signs, so he puts them all in there.
Yeah.
I don't know who taught him decimals, but no thank you for that. So this is where I do feel like, it's like, when you get to a certain level, you really should be able, as a person, to focus on that high level. What is the truly unique human thing that you can bring to this? Like, what is that? You want all your energy on that thing. All the like mechanical, like get it from my brain into this proper format, I don't like it. And I've never liked it. It's never made any sense to me. I've known from a very young age that this was busy work. This was work that I was doing because there wasn't a better way to do it, but not because it was helping me learn. And I mentioned this when we did this, I made the calculator joke as well a year ago. But the thing I mentioned a year ago as well is like, things that I'm sympathetic to is that for a long time, we have thought the human language essay was a great test of human knowledge. It wasn't. It was fine, but that was because like previously so we've invented a word calculator now. And just as I think most of us would consider it foolhardy to imagine a world where calculators weren't common, I consider it foolhardy for us to train, to develop kids in imagining that this word calculator won't be available to them. It will be everywhere. They will have it at all times, in all contexts. And so we, as people whose job it is to prepare them as parents, as educators, for the world they will enter, this is the world they will enter, unquestionably. And so I'd rather figure out what are the basic concepts they need to have just an incredible internal familiarity with as they form concepts, make sure that they can do the work of serializing those thoughts out and internalizing thoughts inward, and then let them take all the horsepower they can get to see how high it can take them, rather than bogging them down when they want to be up here.
So how do we do this as educators, as teachers now, right? Because it's happening so quick, right? Because you read about it, and, it's not really that big a deal at Synapse, right? I was talking to staff about it today. We're project-based. We've got this engineering space. Kids are really in 3D spaces, SEL. But you hear about these teachers in high schools, even some middle schools around here, they're like, we're going back to the blue books, right?
I know, yeah.
I'm like,
Oh,
what?
goodness.
I mean, I did that in the 80s.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like, that's their workaround? Like, come on. So what should schools do now? What should they begin to do now?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned it. I do think, and no flattery, but it's obviously selection bias why a lot of us are here. I think, project-based learning is a great example of like, hey, like, listen, go use all the tools you can use. At the end of the day, it's the project. It's like, did you have a goal that made sense? Did the goal, respond to the prompt? Did you and the team come together in a way that was meaningful to align on that? Those things are the ineffable, like human challenges. It's not the like mechanical, did you type in the form correctly?
Right.
And so I love that as an approach. Is putting these things into a goal-based framework. Like, what are you trying to accomplish, and how can you go about doing that? That's not to say, again, I have no problem truly with saying like, hey, like these are fundamental enough principles that you should be able to do them without a calculator. You should be able to do these without the computer. I think that's cool. I also think it's a great idea to embrace these tools and say, hey, here's a challenge. Give them a challenge that's actually hard to do in a calculator. Give them a challenge that's hard to do with a logic. Like, go do it go ahead. Use all the tools you want to use, and let's see how it goes. I've seen some really cool things. People, as teachers, assigning students to use large language models to write an essay and then critique the essay. Actually, one of my favorite writing assignments I ever got was I had to read a popular science article from from Wall Street Journal, from New York Times, and then I had to go read the scientific article it was based on. And man, those popular science articles that you read are terrible. they're way off. Like the science will be like, really low confidence bound. Like, hey, this is a preliminary result. We're not really confident in it. And the headline is like, scientists demonstrate. It's like, wait, that's not. The scientists don't even say that. Like, that's not what any of this says. Not to mention the statistical literacy of it all. So for me, I love engaging students directly in the critique of the tool. Let them engage. And we had to do another one when I was in college. It was Wikipedia, same thing. Go to the Wikipedia thing for a thing, then do a bunch of primary sources reading on it, and then do a comparison. These are great tools because you're not learning that Wikipedia is evil, and I'm not learning that like the New York Times is bad. You're just learning like, okay, there's some strengths, there's some weaknesses. We need to line these things up.
So what about policymakers? And there's some questions around here from the parents. I mean, what should policymakers do in the context of students and teaching? Is there something they should do? I mean, you look what's going on in some of the public school districts, even around here, where you've got kids showing up at board meetings demanding certain things that are, again, sort of it's like old school, right? They're like, we want it. It's like vote tech almost, right? Like,
yeah.
And which I don't think they see it that way, but I see it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like you're asking for like, again, mechanical vo-tech to get you to whatever college you think you're going to go. What should policymakers do? Because they're getting a lot of pushback from students at the
Totally.
high school level, which is crazy.
Totally. Yeah. What do I think? I think one thing I'll call out here is what is in economics called the knowledge problem. And the knowledge problem, which is really the critique, if you want to know like why communism fails, it's the knowledge problem. It turns out like the majority of information held in any economy is held at the leaf level. It's not held centrally. Central things are good at allocating resources across pieces, but like who knows what goods are actually worth is like the person selling the good and the person buying the good. And the farther you are from that, the farther you are from real knowledge. I'm really skeptical of our ability as a central policy apparatus to provide great guidance here. The knowledge is held at the leaves. The knowledge is held by the people here in this room who are daily engaging with students in the context, with parents and families in the context of what their educational goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. And so, you know, I'm sympathetic, I think, to I'm familiar with the kids showing up at the board meeting, kind of asking for like just a more intense, like the ability to go
Yeah, as far as they can
to 11,
in
you know.
discrete content areas.
But like, what my reaction to that is always like, you know, I don't know those kids. I don't know their lives. I don't know their parents. I don't know the situation that they're in. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish in the world. I'm not generally inclined. If somebody comes to me, even a young person, and says like, I want to go for it.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to be like, hey, let's take the training wheels off. You know, let's you know, maybe you fall, hit your knee, dust up. I understand these are things that we get anxious about as parents, and you certainly don't want your kids to be subject to societal pressure, external pressure. They're going to be.
What should they be like? With AI, you know, what it can do for sort of rudimentary computer science course work, what it can do for mathematics, should kids have to just accelerate through math sequences, get to multivariable calculus by sophomore year,
Yeah.
That seems sort of antiquated, or it's like the old path, but just at an accelerated pace to where?
Yeah. Oh no, I get you. So two things actually. One of which is like just to read the central point that I have is like I'm skeptical of from a central policy perspective anyone's ability to sufficiently answer that question to be able to make any meaningful policy adaptations there. I do think it ends up being local. It ends up being like, hey, like, is this a situation where I think we've got kids who can take advantage and like go do spectacular things?
Right.
We've seen young people do amazing things.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, you know, it can be done.
Right.
Or are they just like, hey, I just want to keep up with the job. I don't know. I think this contextually, like centrally.
Yeah,
I'm
it's context specific, localized.
I'm sensitive to like, let's make a big central, everyone has to use LLMs, or make a big central, no one can use them. I think those are likely to fail in catastrophic and unpredictable ways relative to like, hey, use your judgment. Like we pay all these humans, like, you know, to like be professionally responsible for the classrooms that they're in, like use your judgment. On the second thing I wanted to this, on the question of where is it all going, yeah. There's these two competing concepts that we constantly play with in the technology industry, which is that things change a lot less in 1 year than we expect them to, and then things change a lot more in 10 years than we expect them to. And there's probably something there fundamentally for humans. It's not just it's a saying in our field, but I've heard it repeated in many other areas. They don't always use the same time frame. I think our tech field moves quickly, but like there's just some time frame where people think, man, in 10 years we're going to have this, and we don't. But I think in 100 years we definitely won't have that, and we do. And so we have, as a human species, right? Like we're optimistic in the near term, we're pessimistic in the long term. I touched on that very early on in the talk. And so I don't know where it all lands. I've talked to you kind of about what the big ticket items are. I think it will take the better part of a decade to really plumb this kind of technology into every field. I'd be surprised if it didn't profoundly change education, medicine, law. I would be surprised if it didn't. There will be a secondary effect of each individual using it, and what effect does that have on society, which you raised the question earlier. Again, our history as a species is that we actually tend to do quite well with technological change, and we tend to make ourselves more successful as a society. We tend to make ourselves less poor, have better social networks. Like social safety nets. Like we tend to do a technology disrupts people in power. Nobody hated the printing press more than the people who were in power when it became popularized. And so it's going to be an uncomfortable process. I'm pretty sure we'll end up in a better place, but there will be collateral damage. There will be jobs that exist today that won't exist. Probably not a huge number, but some.
Can you give me one?
I recently looked at this stat, content moderation. Content moderation, that was one we're looking at, right? These are terrible jobs. You know, you're looking at the worst of humanity every day and making judgments. You're making human judgments. Is it like, I don't know, is it okay? Is it not okay? Computers are better at it.
Yeah.
But the problem is before they couldn't understand the human context.
Right.
Famous example that really started us on a whole crazy journey internally was child pornography. Obviously, that's an easy one. There's a database, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children keeps a database of these images. There's a hash file, and if an image matches the hash, you kick it out, and you learn what other things might look. So our algorithm naturally blocked the Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph, Terror of War. Terror of War is one of the photos that is credited for ultimately leading to public support to pull out of Vietnam. It's a picture of a 12-year-old, naked 12-year-old Vietnamese girl running from a napalm attack, and it was a famous and world-changing photograph, which our systems took down. Like, absolutely not. That is child pornography. Now you can't have that. And European publication took us to task for taking it down because they had put it in their publication. It was this whole war. Context like that has been hard to give computers until now. So I think content moderation is one. But I read the stat recently. In 2018, in the census in 2018, or whatever, not the census, but in the study in 2018, 60% of the jobs people have did not exist 60 years earlier. Not that those jobs didn't exist. The entire category of job that they had didn't exist 60 years earlier. So again, my point is like, I'm sympathetic to the local effects that displacement has. It is not trivial to retrain people who've got a profession that's impacted. However, I'm net macro, like broadly enthusiastic. What I will, can I get philosophical for 1 second, not that I haven't already, I don't know why, just this particular second. The rest of it's entirely concrete, based entirely.
Right. Right. Very pragmatic.
One thing that I like about this, about following the pace and the way that we react to technology is very often one of the things that we have this negative reaction to technology is we feel like it's taking away a thing that we thought was the unique domain of humanity. I think the reaction to AI art tools has been particularly interesting. I'm an avid photographer. I mentioned this again a year ago, but avid photographer, Ansel Adams created this group, F64, to try to bring legitimacy to photography because the artists didn't consider it a serious art form. They did not consider photography a serious art form. But if you look at the impact that photography had, not only becoming its own obviously quite respected art form today, but also that is what completely changed paintings. You know, once you had photography, the Platonic ideal of photorealism that had animated, fine art painting for the previous 150, 200 years, maybe longer, depending on how you think about it. Suddenly you get Picasso and Dali, and you get Surrealism, and you get Cubism, and you get Dadaism, and you get Impressionism, and you get all these other you get all these kind of crazy offshoots, and then ultimately, modern art, you get all these crazy offshoots. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I just think every time we do one of these things, we don't cease to be human, but we do rediscover our relationship to what we uniquely offer the world. And I love it. I think it's a super healthy thing. But if you are over the age of 35, it is not easy.
No.
Because you were like, no, I thought I had this thing figured out.
I know.
I had it all dialed. And now
I have a few years on you. I think about this.
I'm back to the drawing board now.
It's like, wow. Yeah, but there was an unlock, right, with that in terms of the art world. That's a great example. So what's because there was a question about unlock here. I wanted to get to it because this is a good segue. What do you think will be the next big unlock in AI that could impact well-being, right? And could it one day help foster more in real life experiences and interactions?
Yeah. So the next one is really fully embracing multimodality, the ability to communicate in images, sounds, and text to this thing and have it respond in images, sounds, and text, whatever's appropriate. And we're working on it. That's the next big unlock. The one that after that is increasing the memory that they have. Right now, you can't build, they have what's called a context window, and there's some pretty hard limits on how to scale those. So like, if you have they're kind of all goldfish right now. If you talk to a large language model long enough, it'll forget the beginning of the conversation.
Oh, will it?
Yeah, and it'll just lose. It has a limited window of content. It's very expensive to maintain a large amount of memory for different reasons. Another unlock that's really critical beyond that is just making it much, much cheaper to execute and operate. Right now, they run on servers. There's a privacy concerns with those things. You can run smaller models on phones. They're just not as good, and are they good enough? The thing that we're driving towards, really, I'm so excited about it, is we've been talking about full augmented reality glasses for a long time. And augmented reality is this concept of a pair of glasses that you have that has microphones and it has cameras, and it's always on and it's aware of what's happening around you. And you could gain access to not only instant access to the world's information through the internet, but also instant access to infinite memory. Everything that you've ever done, you can have perfect recall of it because it's all right there. Human superpower, it's real augmentation of human, call them augmented reality. It's really augmenting humans' capacity. And ideally, they'll have a little display on them that you can see 3D objects in the world and screens contextually relevant to what's happening around them. You wouldn't have your notes on this piece of paper. It would just, when you needed it, would come in. And we've been working on augmented reality for a long time. And we knew that you would need some pretty clever artificial intelligence to do some basic things like, hey, I'm giving a speech, maybe don't put my notifications in front of my face, unless it's my wife and there's an emergency at home, in which case maybe it's okay. So there's like some AI that needs to understand the content and the context of a digital sphere and a physical sphere. But large language models are completely advancing our concept of how cool these augmented reality glasses could be. And even some glasses that come earlier that don't have displays even yet and can't do some of the 3D stuff. If you had a pair of glasses that really understood what your intentionality, what you were trying to do right now, and was there for you when you're like, hey, I've got by the way, it's not all superhuman vision, superhuman hearing, this tremendous number of today we would say even potentially disabilities for some people that can get corrected for, and then abilities, superhuman abilities given to everybody, universally.
Through glasses.
Through these glasses, yeah.
Is that a hardware issue or?
Well, right now it's a lot of the hardware. Yes, the AI also isn't there yet to understand the world around you. You also can't run it. It's a power issue, thermal issue.
Right.
It's a lot of hard things. But for me, like the 10-year thing, that this unlocks is the ability to have a computer. And by the way, even if you're still a phone in your pocket, fine. The glasses are they understand what you're trying to accomplish in the world right now and can put in front of you the tools, digital and physical, that you need to do it.
And in 10 years, you're saying?
So every night, I cook dinner most nights in my household, and I love cooking. I enjoy it. And we get meal kits now. And one of the things I like about these meal kits is that I cook with ingredients that I don't usually cook with, right? So your flavor combinations or spice blends that just weren't culturally something I was exposed to growing up. I can go through a big cookbook, but I don't know which one to get, and am I gonna like it enough? So I like these things. But you're constantly going back and forth between the kit and the thing. I don't know how much,
Right.
And so if you had glasses that were just overlaying, just super subtle, not a big deal, just like, hey, here's what you're doing next. Hey, I think the rice is done. You look at the pot, the little timer's over it. You look at the pan, it's like, yep, hey, you're simmering, it's a little warm. I think to turn that down a little bit.
Right.
Sounds a little high. These little things are so small, and what's individually that's small, but you do this thousands of times a day. People talk about, and rightly so, the mental load of running a household. Laundry needs to get what needs to happen. Who needs? These are the little things that accumulate tremendous weight, and they are the niddly, punctuation details of essay writing. They're not the stuff of it.
No.
It's not like the stuff that it takes to run the household isn't the stuff of it. The stuff of it is the bond, is the family, is the space, is the creation, the connection, is the food, the bonding, the thing. That's the stuff of it. All the mental load is what it takes as the context setter for the stuff to be possible. And like, you can shift that. There's no reason you can't shift that.
That's super interesting.
So I think that's where, over the fullness of time, this becomes a real personal assistant, a real creative helper, a productive helper, a real, friend in dark times, a friend in need.
Right.
Like it's there's something very tangible to it.
So I was just thinking of the superhero Iron Man, right, where he's got his suit,
Jarvis.
right, telling him as he's navigating things at super speed. And I was, a lot of people know I'm a huge cycling fan and aficionado, and a lot of those, if you watch Tour de France, a lot of those guys, when they're descending out of the Alps and the Pyrenees, now they have computers, they're not in their glasses, but they have computers that have such power. When they're descending at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, they're looking at their computer that's giving them navigation that's better than
what they could do from the
right.
Yeah.
And think about that. Like, you're going 70 miles an hour off the mountain and you're staring at a computer. So instead of the road, that's what's happening now. They have sunglasses on, so you can't tell.
Yeah.
And is this what's going to sort of get to us as drivers even? Is it going to be in our, is that near term tech coming?
Yeah, so tremendously, yes, absolutely. And I think you'll have it as an overlay on the glasses themselves. And yeah, superhuman reaction timing is a good example of this. One of the things that the glasses allow you to do is anticipate things that you couldn't possibly anticipate without them. And we see some of this, right? Like when your cars brake before humans can now, right? Like in dangerous situations, most cars today produced since 3 years ago
that's right.
have the ability to brake, and they can brake faster and more precise than humans. I mean, and this goes back, we've been doing this for a long time. Analog brakes, our system we built, a mechanical system. Humans were supposed to pump the brakes so they didn't lock up. And we're like, yeah, you suck at that. Like we'll just put it into the system. We can detect the exact moment at which lockup's about to happen, and we can push on. So there's very few things. I mean, we're talking about cycling. We're talking about cooking a meal for your family. We're talking about laundry. We're talking about safely driving cars. We're talking about all these things. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah. And
it's going to be glorious. It really will be an absolute triumph. We taught sand to think, you guys. It's taught sand to think. Take a lap. Feels great.
All right. Let's we can talk all night long.
Really, Jim and I have this. Is the wrong two people to put on the stage with microphones.
We were talking about who is the Netscape founder?
Yeah, Jim Barksdale, great quotes.
So he has these colloquialisms and these sort of sayings. And I have a friend who once said to me, "Jim, you could talk a starving dog off a meat truck."
Yeah, that's.
Is that something he would say?
That's definitely Jim Barksdale, legendary CEO of Netscape.
Yes.
And he was a real folksy guy.
That's a folksy thing there. So, but I want to make sure I read some questions, but I wonder if people have questions in the audience, although I can't see anybody, Sarah Hill. I can see you.
If they stand up, we can see them. Once they interrupt the light streams.
Is there a way we can?
Oh, there's a hand. I see a hand. I can always see that hand because it's against the white background of the Synapse School bar. Yeah, so let's talk, this is a great question, and let's talk really materially about what those consequences are. And I want to, again, kind of refer back to my earlier comments with the internet. What are the real consequences? So here's this thing that encodes of associative index of human knowledge, and let's strip away all the safety protections. I'm just going to give you one that's totally raw. You can cause it to write really racist things. Now, I have bad news for you guys. The internet is full of just people writing really racist things. In fact, you don't need this machine at all to write really racist things. So one thing that you'll read a lot about, and by the way, we're doing it too, is you'll hear we're doing safety. It's actually hard. If you go to WhatsApp, you can go to one of our chat assistants. We launched them at Connect last week. They're great. I know you're all in WhatsApp because I'm in all the parent groups.
And I hear they're good.
They're good.
Boz
They're
is telling,
really
because
good.
I'm worried. I think it's
I'm
going to be like
so
next door.
happy with the WhatsApp groups. I'm so
Yeah,
pleased, you guys.
Boz is a big fan.
We're in there. They're good. We're throwing jokes. It's good. So, anyways, you can do it, and you can try to get it to say, and it won't. It'll say, I can't do that. And you can try to get it to say violent things, and it say, I can't do that. And I think this is fine, but it's not real safety or protection, because we're not actually protecting anyone from anything. That stuff is all out there. And it does have a lot of weird negative externalities. For example, in computer science, it's not uncommon to use a thing called every single program is a process, and you want to kill a process. So if you ask a large language model, how do I kill a process? It says, hey, I can't possibly help you with that. I'm not trying to kill a person. I'm like, the word kill is like overloaded, and it knows that, but we've safetied it up to the gills, and so it's refusing. We call these false refusals. It's refusing even useful requests because it's afraid that it's going to be doing a non-useful thing. And so when I think about the harms of digital tools, scams, spam, fraud, abuse, misinformation, these are the ones that occupy a lot of our time and attention as a society. This is certainly a great vector for spam. A spammer can now create way more unique spam than ever before. But it's a way more valuable tool for us to defeat spam. The big problem with spam before was that it was actually hard for us to keep up with the creativity of humans, and now we have a tool that can kind of recognize spam. Actually, child pornography is another interesting one. Child pornography, if you wanted to get around these filters at the National Center of the database, what they do is they'll take the image and they'll shrink it and they'll rotate it and they add like a wave, and now every human pedophile can look at that picture, they know what that picture is, but the machine can't recognize it because again, you didn't click the X. Large language models have no problem recognizing this. So spams and a bunch of types of abuse that it potentially empowers, actually it's a much more asymmetrically valuable tool for defense. I'm more worried about it for targeted abuse and fraud. Why? Well, a thing that was really hard 2 years ago, but it's actually totally doable now, is you could train a large language model on my voice, and it will sound exactly like me. It will fool my mother. So you really need to do education. So for example, Meta, we built probably the world's best voice model. We didn't release it. We didn't release it. We were like, look, maybe you can do some cool things with this, but mostly it seems like it's a risk for this. But it's out there already. There's nothing you can do to prevent this technology from being out there. We didn't train it. No one bad. It's just like that's out there. So we do need to educate a lot of people on the fact that in the future, all media you see might have been generated. You will not know. Misinformation, same thing. I mentioned this last time. I want you to think about this. We lived in a very unusual period of human history where for most of my life, if you saw an image, it was a real image. That wasn't true before cameras, and it won't be true ever again. But for a moment in time, that was true. If you saw a video, you knew it was real. Also not true anymore, and won't ever be true again. Now, I want to be clear, most of human history, most media was fallible. Most media was illustrations and writing, and it was absolutely full of untruths and bias and these things. And so that's always been true with writing, and we've known that. That will also be true with all forms of media going forward because that's who we are as a species, and we got to own that.
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Because like portraitures of like kings and queens, right? They were.
Oh, they didn't look like that.
Was it Henry VIII? Was he obese? But the portraits of some of the famous portraits of him in the galleries around
Went to
the
the
world.
gym.
Right, he's got calves of steel.
Guys' calves are amazing.
And he was a mess, but they were all false.
So misinformation is a thing that humans have been doing for a long time. It's kind of a funny one that's become this watchword, like, oh, we're so shocked. Have you never, we all have seen propaganda from the war, right? Propaganda from our government during the war to our own citizens, let alone propaganda from us to others. It's like, and you're seeing propaganda war right now in the Middle East, you're seeing propaganda war in Russia and Ukraine. As long as we've had media, we have used it to misinform people. And by the way, it's not like it's random bad actors. It's our own government doing this all over the world, doing it to us all the time. So I don't know, these are things where I think sure, you can use LLMs for those things. You don't need them for those things. Those things exist. Those are bad things. LLMs, you can like try to make them safe from those things. I think they're probably on net more beneficial to preventing the spread of those things and identifying those things than they are to doing them. Um, uh, what are the real concerns? There's a couple other ones. Cyber attacks is a commonly cited concern. Certainly, there is an ability that these coding ones have to debug problems that can be useful to those. However, one thing that you should know is that every single major institution in this world is already constantly under cyber attack from nation-state level actors, state-sponsored, in North Korea, in China. Every single piece of American infrastructure, every nuclear plant is under constant, extremely sophisticated, extremely well-funded attack. I don't think LLMs are a game changer there. LLMs don't take the top person and like cause them to be like 10x better. They take the bottom person and make them 10x better. And given the top people are already attacking us 24/7, I don't see a major change in cyber. Biosecurity is the one that has lingered a lot, and I've spent time with governments around the world on this issue. Why is biosecurity a problem? The reason is asymmetric risk. If I create a biohazard, if I create COVID, almost certainly was created in a lab through escalation of function. If I create a pathogen and I release it into the world, it can get out in the world long before a vaccine can be developed and deployed. And so the asymmetric risk from biohazards is one that governments are watching now real carefully. Now, what I have found, and this is not going to help you sleep tonight. What I have found is that what really happened is we did not do a good job as a global governance group locking down bio risks over the last century. Nuclear actually would be a reasonable proxy, except for that nuclear has been really well governed, going back to the Nuclear Energy Commission 60 years ago. And so, I had a kind of funny meeting where someone was like, well, we really try to lock down nuclear secrets. No, they don't. I've known how to make a nuclear bomb since I was a sophomore in college. It's not that hard to find out that information. What is hard to get is uranium-235. That's tricky. Plutonium-238. That's tricky. Those are hard things. We've locked those down. It turns out you can mail order ricin. Anthrax naturally occurs in crops. If you Google anthrax, as I have, by the way, government may visit you, don't blame me. If you Google it, turns out like the top result is like, so you've got anthrax in your crops again. How do you get rid of it? So like that's how naturally occurring anthrax is. You just like leave a potato out long enough and you get anthrax. And so these primary pathogens that are used for escalation of function research in what we call wet labs around the world have crazy easy access to dangerous pathogens, and escalation of function is not that hard to Google today. Actually, there was a really funny case where somebody tried to use a large language model to do this. They did some exercise, and they published this big paper that was like, the large language model helped these people solve these problems of escalation of function research, which could be the path to building a bioweapon. If it had only solved these other two problems, links here, and they published this paper, and I was like, just so you guys know, your paper is actually now more useful than the large language model was at creating a biohazard, because you've identified the things that the large language model screwed up, and you pointed us at the research that shows how to do that. So I just want to call this out. So what do I think? The good news is all the people doing large language models at scale, which is a tremendously expensive enterprise, you're really dealing with 4 companies, Google, Meta, OpenAI, and to a lesser extent, Anthropic. There's a lot of upstarts. That's not totally fair to say. There's Falcon out of the United Arab Emirates. There's Mistral in France, which did absolutely no safety work on theirs. And by the way, that's how it's going to continue to happen at times. We're all doing immense safety work. We do a ton of safety work in-house, and we do what's called red teaming, which is you hire experts in each of these fields I just mentioned to come in and attack the model and try to break it. And you're watching the query stream, and you're looking at people who are jailbreaking the model, and you're patching it up. I think it's fine. It's not bad. You're certainly preventing the casual user from having a really bad experience with it. I think they mostly missed the point of what the tool is, though. And again, I do think in general, it's the internet. And the things that are in this thing are in the internet. It got them from the internet. That's where they came from. It's from the internet. And so unless you're willing to say, I think we should shut the internet down, which some are, but usually they end up in this awkward thing of like, no, I want the internet, but like they shouldn't have it. Unless you're willing to say shut the internet down, I think you kind of end up being like, okay, let's harness the good in this thing and try to figure out how we can use it to prevent these harms.
Good answer. Let's not end on something that's going to make us not sleep well.
I mean, seriously, my cousin is a pediatrician. His husband works at a wet lab, and independent of our large language models, was sharing with us one Christmas. Like, he's like, it's like scary easy to get these things and like make them bad.
Here we keep going on the nightmares.
Yeah, it's scary.
Do we have one more question out there? Again, it's hard to see.
Straight ahead. I don't even know.
We really can't see.
Right there.
Is it Mike? Yeah, I can see Mike. Yeah.
So, AI, if it's providing superhuman efficiency for accessing information, existing knowledge bases, where do you see it helping us in true innovation? And that could also be, reflected back onto Jim's education questions earlier.
Yeah, in both ways. The first thing is human time. Human time is the greatest net positive force. Human free time, our ability to like think and do things. When we were all like just having to like farm all day, it was like we just have that much time. The more time we have, the more this curve compounds, which is why our lives are better now, so much better now than they were 100 years ago, relative to even 1,000 years ago. So getting rid of the rote work is a hugely important deal, and I think we should not ignore the importance of just freeing up human capital. But the second thing is, these are creative tools. A good way to think of this is actually matrix math. Is our math specialist still here? I can't tell. So maybe not. Is like matrix math. Like, so, when you're doing multiplication of two vectors, you end up in like a novel vector space. And so like, when we, like Jim and I, like having a debate will unlock some new idea for me because he's got a perspective, and he'll get some new idea from me because I've got a new perspective, and now we end up in a place that the two of us previously on our own could not have gotten to. We've done more. This thing it can be anybody. It can be a million different editors, conversation starters. And so I had a good experience recently, actually, on the cybersecurity point. I have a corporate controlled laptop, and I'm doing completely sanctioned activity. I know because I'm allowed to sanction those activities because I'm the chief technology officer. But the IT policies on my laptop weren't allowing me to install a certain technical code library that I needed. And I just took a shot. I was like, you know what? Let me go to the AI. And it was able to like walk me through an unbelievably arcane set of steps I never would have gotten to on my own to circumvent our corporate security, which I'm also responsible for, so it's fine. So I'm allowed to do that. And then I sent an email to the team being like, by the way, you got to patch, you got to shore this thing up. I just hacked our system. It wasn't really a hack. It was totally fine. But it was like, so this is from the rote work side of things. And then I was working on this project, and it's you're trying to imagine interfaces that have never existed. What does it look like for me to walk around? And so I started. We have a multimodal model that we're playing with internally. So I started playing with like, hey, like walk me through some visions of a display that's in front of your face as you walk around the world. And it didn't give me any keepers, any good options, but it really helped me think about. I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. It's decided to put the display in the far distance. So one of the versions of it, it put the display like beyond the world, like beyond the horizon. And I was like, what a cool idea. I hadn't thought about that. But like now nothing's in the way, and I've got this kind of interesting reference point in the sky. It's impractical. We can't actually do it. The contrast ratio is like 1,000,000 to 1. But like, it was a cool thing. So I don't know. That is a thing it's hard. I'm sure I could have gotten. It was literally 2 in the morning when I was doing this. I'm sure I could have gotten on the phone with somebody and been like, hey, let's think through this, and maybe we would have come up with it. But I just think we undervalue how much we benefit from getting outside of our own fixed point of view, and how much this thing, which has encoded enough human knowledge and the ability to hallucinate between multiple points of it, that it can go to completely novel places. And there's something powerful there that humans as editors, as the tastemakers of like what is good and what is not good, will benefit a lot from.
I think we're going to end with that positive note.
I love it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Boz. This was great.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming out.
Cheers.
Yeah. Everybody drive safe. And I want to say special thanks to Sarah Hills, who's here, who put this together. This is super.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.